Hi, and welcome to Excel with Trish. In today's video, I'll show you how to create and use a drop-down menu. Let's get started. In this example, I want to create and use three different drop-down menus. The first is expense type, then office name, then client code. I want to add one more category or one more option to the end of each list. So in expense, I'll add meals, office name, I'll add Boston, and in client code, I'll just add a generic client code, unknown. At the end of each list, I like to use two dashes, and I'll explain this to you shortly why I do it. Now that each of my lists are complete, I can go ahead and create the drop-down menus. So I want the headers to remain the same. So what I'll do is I will copy and then paste those header names elsewhere on the sheet. I want to expand these a little bit so that they aren't overlapping with each other. In my first category, expense type, I'll select the cells that I want to use the drop-down menu for. Because I'm not selecting the entire column, I'll highlight the cells that do have the drop-down menu. That way I don't forget. And because I'll do the same for office name and client code, I'll just go ahead and highlight those now as well. So first for expense type, I'll select the cells that will have the drop-down options, and then I'll go to data, and then the data validation option. So I'll click here, and for allow, I only want to allow a list. I'll select list, and you can leave ignore blank and in cell drop-down selected. And for source, I will select the expense options that I created. So I'll select the first option, which is consultant, and I'll drag down all the way to the last cell, which are the dashes that I created, and click OK. Now, as you can see, a drop-down arrow popped up. So here it tells me that my list that I selected, that I created, then selected, it has the options that I expected. So it starts with consultant, and then the last option are these dashes. So I'll select printing. In every cell that I selected to have the drop down, you'll see has a little arrow. So in the very last one, I'll just pick consultant. So with office name, we want to do the same. We'll select all the cells under office name, data, then data validation. We'll select list, and then our source will be our office name, starting with Atlanta all the way down to the dashes. Click OK. And then for client code, we'll do the same. So data, data validation, list, and our client code options. So under office name, our list of office options came up. I'll pick Houston. And then for client code, our list of client options came up. I'll click client B. So you created this list of options, and these should be the only options that populate in your list or in your cells. So if you try to type or something else in the cell, for example, I'll just pick 1, 2, 3, client D, you'll receive an error message that this value doesn't match the data validation. What it's telling you is that this isn't an option in the list that was created. So you need to either try again by typing in something that actually is on the list, or just cancel it. So I'll go ahead and I'll type something that's on the list, but the characters have to match exactly. So if you have a dash between the number, or if you have a space between the number and the dash, then you need to make sure you have a space when you're typing it in. And so I typed in 241 client A. I'll just hit enter. and it accepted it because I typed it in exactly as it is over here. And then we can just pick another client here. As I mentioned, when I create drop-down list, I like to have something that indicates the end of the list, but I also use it as a way to add in additional options without having to go through the entire process of selecting the cells again, going to data, and then clicking on data validation. So here, because my source data already has this as the last option on the list, if I wanted to add another option in the drop-down menu, I'll hit cut, so Control X, and then I'll hit Control V. So here I can just add another option. Let's pick housing. And now when I go over to my drop-down menu, housing is now on the list. So that's an easy way to add additional options without having to go through all the steps that I showed you earlier. If you were to add something underneath the dashes, such as snacks, then it wouldn't show up because it's not shown in your source data. And to see that again, if you want to recall what your source data was, then again, just go to data, click on the data validation, and you can see right here that I picked cells B4 through B16. But if I wanted to include snacks, I would then need to reselect all the way down to snacks and hit OK, and then it'll show up. Well, thanks for checking out my video today. That's all I had for you on how to create and use drop-down menus. I hope to see you next time. Thanks.